Hey folks, Colin here from Something's Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to mix clean electric guitars. We're going to be going through mixing this pair of clean electric guitars here for this song, but before we dive in, if you're ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF guide that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and look at this pair of guitars. Now I'm going to mute the vocal here. The song hasn't quite been released yet. Just a finished mix here. We're looking at this pair of electric guitars in the bridge. They're the only really wide-panned instruments, besides, I guess, our overheads and some of our drum elements here, our room mics and things, and then our background vocals as well. But there are only wide-pan guitars. Our other guitars and our keyboards are kind of half-panned here. These are filling the end of the stereo spectrum. So let me play this bridge section for you, and then I'll solo up the pair of guitars so you can hear what they're doing in the bridge section. So here's our finished instrumental mix. So you can hear there are these very pristine, chorusy electric guitars filling out this bridge section here. And if you listen close at the beginning of this pass here, you can actually hear the guitarist click on their chorus pedal, which is just always a really cool thing to hear for me as a musician, just, live tracking like that. So we're doing quite a few things here to get these set inside the mix. There's some work going on the individual tracks and then processing on the bus as well. So let me play you these one more time and I'll turn off all of our processing and you can hear where we started. So you can hear before they kind of sit farther back in the mix. They're a bit heavier. We're doing a lot of work here to get them brighter, to get them to cut through the mix, and to make sure they're heard and they're not sitting too far back in the track here. I'm going to take off our bus processing and we're going to start one guitar at a time. We're going to look at this one on the left here first. So we're going to start no processing here and just looking at our EQ. The first thing I'm doing on our EQ is I'm narrowing the frequency spectrum. This is something I do a lot with guitars, especially heavier electric guitars, but clean guitars as well sometimes, is to just isolate the heart of the sound on the frequency spectrum and then go in and do more EQ. So we're rolling in a high-pass filter at 138 hertz and then a low-pass filter up to 9K. This sets our frequency range for the guitar so we know where the heart of this sound is sitting. So you can hear before, and then I'll kick these two filters in. Just rolling off some of that heaviness in the bottom end there, especially on this guitar on the left. It had some frequencies down in that lower spectrum that we didn't need. They're going to compete with our bass guitar and our kick drum. So just rolling that off helps focus our sound on some of this mid-range energy, which is what you're selling on guitars here. Now our next move here is I'm pulling out quite a bit at about 284 hertz, so almost 300 hertz here. We're pulling out 5 dB. This is going to pull out some of that muddiness and that heavy sort of sound in the low mids here. So listen without and then with this cut. So we're removing a part of the sound that we don't necessarily need because there's already other instruments that are filling that range. The bass guitar, some of the bottom end on the acoustics, and the piano. We don't need any heaviness or this kind of low mid area to be added by our electric guitar here. Last thing we're doing with this EQ is I'm adding a touch of mid-range information because, again, this is what we're selling on guitars is mid-range information. That's where they sit. That's the most important part of this frequency range. We're adding 1.14K. We're adding about 3 dB there. So listen to how this fills out our sound here in the mid-range. It's helping make sure our guitar doesn't feel so far back in the track, bringing some of this mid-range information forward. That's all for our first EQ here. Just a little bit of generic styling here on this first guitar. And then again, we're doing some bus processing as well. I love using this compressor on guitars. It's kind of my, LA3A style compressor that I have going on here. I've got the attack, medium attack here, faster release, and I'm only doing probably about 3, maybe 4 dB reduction here on this guitar. So take a listen without it, and then I'll kick it in here. I don't know what it's doing, but at these settings on guitar, just doing that 3, maybe 4 dB reduction always seems to sit the guitar exactly where I want it. It gives me some evenness, but it seems to bring the guitar forward a little bit more. So it's not sitting so far back with all that chorus and verb on it. Now, the last thing I put on this guitar was it was getting a little pokey up in the top end, and you can see some of that information floating around the 3 and 4K range on the EQ. So I'm putting a de-esser in, and we're just attacking everything above 2K, 20-to-1 ratio, fastest attack, fastest relief. We're just going to control some of this information up on the top end here. So listen without and then with. It grabs some of those top notes and makes sure they don't poke out and hurt the listener's ears at all. Because again, these are the only guitars that are wide panned in the track. So if they get pokey and they get edgy, that's going to bother our listeners. We don't want any of that going on. That's our first guitar. Let's jump over now. Here is our guitar on the right. Same kind of processing going on from the start here with our first EQ. First thing we're doing is isolating our frequency range. So rolling off bottom end and rolling off top end. Actually, same kind of points here. 138 on the high pass and 9K on the low pass. So listen without and then with these filters. Not much change going on there. We could go up further, but I'm using this band here at, again, 284 to pull out about almost 4 dB here. You can see there's some energy building up there. So just reducing that a little bit frees up the rest of the space in our electric guitar. So listen without this cut and then with it. We could leave more of that in, but I'm pulling some extra out because we get some energy back in the low mids when we throw compression on and when we move to the bus as well. Next move I'm making here is I'm adding this touch of mid-range here. Same thing, 1.41K, just about 3 dB here, and it's going to bring our guitar forward a little bit in the track. It's just that kick of mid-range energy that pushes our guitar forward and makes it not feel so scooped inside the track. Last but not least here, This guitar didn't have as much top end energy as our left guitar, so I'm adding just a touch of this 5K area. I've narrowed the Q a little bit because I don't want to mess with this 3K area. So just pulling up a touch of this 5K helps brighten this guitar on the right so it sits more evenly with our left guitar. You can hear it adds that little bit of air at that 5K area as we reach up, and just enough brightness that it feels like it's not so dark or so dull inside the track. Now, I am adding the same kind of compressor here. So take a listen here without this, and then with it. Same settings as before, medium attack, faster release, doing about 3 to 4 dB reduction. You can hear it solidifies our EQ work from before. It's a nice finishing touch for me on guitars to put this Everest compressor on because it feels like it confirms what we did before. It just concretes in our EQ settings on the guitar. So that's really, really nice to have. So here's our two guitars so far, and I'll flip them back to stereo as well. All right, almost done here. A little bit more work we're gonna do on the bus channel here. So now that we've done any kind of work that we need on each of the individual tracks, making sure they're not too edgy, not too heavy, not too pokey, we can come to the bus and work on them as a pair here. So there's a few moves we're doing on the bus to get everything set. The first thing I'm doing is I'm adding a touch, just a little bit, a half dB at 142 hertz to bring in some of that bottom end energy here. So listen to this, it's a subtle move. It's just that little bit of energy down in that lower octave to help fill out our guitars. Make sure they're not too thin, because our next move here is we're reducing some more of this kind of low mid area around 300 hertz. We're at 286 hertz, and now as a pair, we're pulling out 2.5 dB here. So take a listen without this cut and then with it. You could hear there was still some buildup going on there around 300 hertz. So these two moves here balance together. We pull out some of this low mid area and then add some bottom end to kind of even out, so we're not too thin sounding, but we're not too muddy sounding as well. I'm emphasizing more of this mid-range area, 1.41K, adding another 2.5 dB here. So take a listen here. We're going to further bring our guitars forward and make sure we have some mid-range that's going to sit nicely on the stereo spectrum here. Emphasizing our chorusy sound as well there in the mid-range. Starting to sound like some clean chorus guitars. And last move here on our EQ, adding more brightness because we've done the control we need on our left guitar to make sure it's not too pokey, so we can bring up some of this 4K area now on our guitars together to add some brightness, and so you can hear that kind of top end panned wide on our stereo spectrum. So we're at 4K, adding about 2.5 dB. That 4K area, that's that top end shine we want to hear on some clean chorused electric guitars. And last but not least, one more time with this guy, this Everest C100A compressor. again, just to concrete in all of the EQ work we've done on these guitars and hold them kind of in place together as a package in this bridge section. So listen without this, and then I'll kick it in. You'll hear how it really just adds that finishing touch, that little bit of shine, that thickness that we need in the bottom end. It's going to round out these guitars as a package. Same settings here, medium attack, and then fast release, doing about 3 dB reduction on these together. Not changing our tone too much. Like I said, it's just emphasizing the work we've already done. And it's one of the reasons I love that compressor so much. So listen here, before and then after on our electric guitars, processing on each of the individual channels and then together on the bus. So when you're tackling a pair of clean electric guitars, do a little bit of processing if you need to on each of the individual channels. So if something's too bright, adding that de-esser to pull down those pokey frequencies, doing some compression to get them sitting together, and then working on them as a package. So adding that brightness, adding that mid-range, that bottom end, and giving them some compression so they sit as a package inside your track. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you are ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.